Exercise Delicious does it again. He talks about women, divorce, and the vulnerable wife industry, which is exactly what it is. It's an industry where women marry men, use them, and then toss them aside with divorce and absorb all their assets, right? Also, the mental extreme cruelty and purity of the woman. See, let's get into this. This post is meant to serve as a prelude to the temperance movement because I asked Exercise Delicious to cover the temperance movement. He is such a good uh, at what do you call it? Researching this, right? I realized that if I started talking about the temperance movement, it would very likely appear to be something independent of issues that we discuss with respect to feminism. That's a good call on his part. Part of the reason for the failure of the various men's rights activism is that we regularly commit recency bias. Feel free to examine my original assertion on that here. As I often like to point out, there's a continuous nature to the oppression that men face, and we are not actually going through anything unique here in 2026 or even in 1926, right? Let's see, maybe I'll get it a little bigger. No, it's already at 150. I'll leave it at that. No fault divorce, 1969. A number of discussions that some of us might have had generally involve mentioning this dubious idea that no fault divorce is the reason that marriages are falling apart. I'm guilty of that. I've been victim of this framing myself. Oh, thank you, Exercise. No fault divorce was inscribed into law by Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan, hey, there's that traditional conservative, everybody. All you guys, there's these trad cons, right? They're all about keeping the marriage going, right? In 1969, in California's Family Law Act, he thought he was putting a humane end to the melancholy charade, the institutionalized perjury, where couples had to stage fake scandals just to secure amicable split. Well, the wife wanted the split, right? To be specific, his motivation for putting this into law was personal, and that I believe was the fundamental flaw in his motion. That's an interesting thing to say. Let's see what he means. Reagan was driven by the lingering trauma of his own 1948 divorce from Jane Wyman, where he had been forced to sit silently as Hollywood tabloids broadcasting her allegations of mental cruelty. Right. So, of course, he had to sit there and take it, didn't he? Notice all these guys that get falsely accused, they remain silent, don't they? The video I just covered about that billionaire, he says nothing. Right? Weaponized his private life for public consumption. He thought by removing fault entirely, he would strip bitter spouses of the legal leverage used to extort men through character assassination. Modern critics look at the wreckage of the family law and blame the 1970s no fault. But if you step into the time machine and set the dial to 1872 or even 1849, right? That's why he mentioned 1926. This is before 1926. You find society panicking over the exact same thing, except they didn't have no fault to blame. That's a very interesting thing for him to say. Instead, they blamed alcohol and moral decay. See, this is where he's going to eventually do a later post talking about alcohol, right? And they used the law to trap men in a permanent provider role, coverture, while treating women as fragile subjects prone to neurasthenia. I don't know what that is. I'd have to check that out. Charade about charades in divorce court. Monetary incentives that propel women to divorce their men were manufactured by women themselves. That's why this is in boldface, guys. Women enter, I'll say it over and over again. Eric Schiedler says this. Women get married knowing that they're going to get divorced, right? It is widely believed that couples that simply wanted to amicably, like screwing that word up, split up, and were working with each other to finally get their right to separate. That's what I assume too, guys, by the way. While I am sure there are instances of that being true, I agree with that. I want to highlight something that might have been missed in this. Alimony was and still is being paid to the wife upon divorce. By the way, guys, why are modern day men paying women who can supposedly work for themselves? Why are they paying them? Right? This is a general rule. The concept that man would willingly separate from their wife with the same desires is about as believable as a man saying that they and their wife divorced amicably today. Men tend to bottle up, curl up, and withstand the abuse, just like Reagan did, right? How are dead bedrooms a thing? Right. The president has data that supports this. What percentages of divorce are initiated by men today? Surely it's the same percentage that actually had an equally willing husband and wife to divorce. Exactly. It's always the women who really want to get rid of the man. Men have to bribe women into their lives. Women accept the bribe, they tolerate the man, and eventually they say enough. Right. What is far more believable to me is that the wives were giving their husbands two choices. One, accept my deal to divorce, go along with the charade, and we will divorce friendly with minimal as possible damages to your finances, or as possible, or two, I will drag your name through the mud and make your financial situation far worse. And by the way, exercise, there's a lot of women out there that actually prefer the second to the first. We assume that number one is always going to be number one. But we've seen far too many cases of women saying, no, I just want you to suffer. Your money comes second. Your suffering comes first. And this dynamic exists to this day. Nothing has changed about how couples divorce. Now women might compel their men to accept bargain deals. Though it's not really a bargain, right? It's not really a deal. It's extortion. This sort of dynamic makes this motion of couples agreeing to divorce and tricking the courts disingenuous, in my opinion. I agree with you, exercise. And how politicians manufacture consent for no-fault divorce in the first place. Now, divorce and the monetary incentives. Divorce itself was made more accessible by feminists with the invention of threat narratives. That's what's happening with Me Too, guys. Me Too today. I don't mean Me Too, but like the Me Too hashtag. Threat narratives, right? Put this man behind jail, behind bars, because I said so, right? Here's my story. I would like to try to dispel the idea that the reason that divorce happens is because women were given incentives to divorce due to the cash prize at the end. This statement implies that women did not work at all in any shape or regard to push the legislation restructuring to extract money and resources from the husband in divorce. Women have actively done that through history. This statement inadvertently implies that women act as passive actors. That's why women are rarely ever jailed, right? She didn't do anything. She was just along for the ride, right? And had no participation in legal restructuring of divorce law. Something I plan to expand on in a later post. I'll be looking forward to that post. This statement inadvertently, all right, here. While men are enablers of this behavior, we're guilty of that, The idea that women are incentivized by forces external to them assumes two things. One, firstly, it assumes that men would engage in this behavior if given the opportunity, which men don't, right? Two, it assumes that men crafted this system independently of women, without pressure from them in the first place, which of course is a lie. Women dominate. They dominate in the bedroom. They dominate in the community, which they control, and therefore they dominate in the legal system. Divorce was existent in history, and the manner of which they unfolded is similar. Now, going back further in time, we observe the nature of family courts today because the long-standing history of America, and arguably the rest of the world, since its inception, we're going to go through two hallmark cases in divorce law that arguably created this domino effect we are observing today. 1892 and 1849. Wow, this is going back 150 years, right? This is way before the Second World War, right? Okay, the cornerstone case about cruelty and divorce in 1892 was Barnes versus Barnes. Being suspicious of an unfaithful wife got a husband divorced. Wow. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, modern guys? Right? Like misogyny is simply the mistrust of women, not the hatred, right? If there is a single smoking gun court case that permanently shifted the definition of legal cruelty away from physical safety into the realm of subjective emotional perception, it is the California Supreme Court landmark case, Barnes versus Barnes. Right. See, since it's subjective, emotional, perceptive, the woman doesn't have to prove anything. Right. This case officially established the legal blueprint for the subjective mental cruelty backdoor that swept across the family courts nationwide. Wow, nationwide, and it swept through. In other words, once it opens up, the floodgates, because everyone serves women, right? Laying the direct groundwork for the modern divorce system. This was a case where the husband allegedly was accusing his wife of cheating on him. This was what the wife used as literal grounds for divorce, citing the accusations as a form of extreme cruelty. Wow, sounds familiar. Again, modern guys. Notice how we're not modern at all. We're the same apes going across the savannah as we always have been. So just the man saying, I think my wife is cheating on me, is considered extreme cruelty. So this isn't new, right? Before Barnes, a divorce trial required relatively objective, falsifiable evidence. Medical logs of bruises, broken bones, or eyewitnesses to physical threats. Right, exactly. After Barnes, the legal standard became entirely subjective and unfalsifiable. Again, you guys are noticing this now, so am I. But this is over 100 years ago, right? If a wife testified that her husband's disposition or words caused her grievous mental anguish, it was virtually impossible for the man to legally disprove her internal feelings. Wow. Wow. All you guys who think that, and you know what? These tradcon bums that say facts over fiction, or, facts over feelings, right? If they really believe that, how come these guys don't work to change it? To change it back to where it used to be, right? By achieving this precedent, Barnes versus Barnes effectively turned extreme cruelty into a universal, open backdoor for unilateral divorce. It handed women the absolute legal leverage to threaten a husband with a public reputation-ruining defamation suit guaranteeing that she could walk away with the assets and the children under the guise of protecting her delicate sensibilities. By the way, the children are considered assets. It's not that she cares about the children. Because sometimes these women dump the children onto the husband. Say, sorry, I got your money. I'm looking for a new man. And the kids are just going to get in the way. We see that all the time, too. While leaving the husband entirely holding the bag for all remaining marital debts and liabilities. That's been true anyway. Women get married to men. They throughout history, they rack up the debt, and then the men are the ones who have to pay it. I mean, what was Marie Antoinette all about, right? That's exactly what happened there. This what arguably marked a permanent scar on the marriage landscape. Well, I don't know if you could put a scar on a boil, but I guess. This all hinged on the introduced concept of mental suffering. A mere 20 years after its inception, it began fulfilling its purpose. Now, 1872, the legal architect, this is California Civil Code, was Joel Prentice Bishop, a towering legal theorist whose deep roots in evangelical Protestantism. I'm not screwing up my words. But the point is, all you guys, why did I say? Why did I cover the religions? All religions are religion of women. It's the worship of the female. All of them. So notice it was this religious man who was all about community and keeping the family together that destroyed it. Heavily influenced family law across the United States. Bishop used the case of Butler versus Butler in 1849 as a precedent to argue that if a husband's constant, harsh disposition or ungrounded accusations, there it is, he doesn't trust her, right, ruined a wife's peace of mind. It was a direct assault on her health. So the man sees her sleeping around. He calls her out on it. Divorce time. Give me your money, right? Because the woman was sleeping. Women going to go sleep around with other guys anyway, no matter what. But also, when it happens a lot, it's basically a prelude to the woman leaving anyway, right? Reason one for the 1872 Civil Code, lawmakers like Preston were not acting in a vacuum. They were folding under immense, highly coordinated pressure from first-wave feminist lobbies. Hey, see? Feminists were good in the past, guys. It's only modern feminism that was bad, right? And evangelical women's society. Notice this goes hand in hand with religious. The women control the family unit, the community. They control religion, right? And therefore, they control the political scene with their lobbies. This guy, he could have said no. They really couldn't force his hand. But men give in to pressure from women, right? Activists like Elizabeth Cady Stanton had spent decades aggressively petitioning legislators. These women never give up, right? This woman, Elizabeth, she could have done something with her life. She could have enjoyed her life, but she is a pit bull, right? She did for decades. You see, when men's rights fail at something, they just give up. That's the problem with the modern, well, not modern, the MRM period. But these feminist attack dogs, all they got in their lives are hate. That's their whole motivation. Hate and dominance. Explicitly using the moral authority of the church to demand that the state police and domestic sphere. Oh, sorry, that the state police the domestic sphere, right? Well, there's no morality to the church. I found that out the hard way. Lawmakers didn't invent the delicate female victim framework because they wanted to. They codified it because organized women movements gave them the political ultimatum, right? Well, I thought women had no power. All you liars. I thought women had no political power. Right. Now, Stanton was one of the key figures actively painting the idea of nurturing vulnerable female mind. We all know that women are not nurturers. It's the men who are the empathetic gender. For example, here are some instrumental quotes from her, predating this legal precedent. Experience teaches us that women cannot legislate, men cannot legislate for women. And if the object of government is to protect the weak against the strong, this is more projection, how unwise to place the power wholly in the hands of the strong. Again, this is projection. In other words, women are the strong ones. Men are, I'm going to reverse the genders because this is what's true. Teaches us that women cannot legislate for men. Right? That's what it is. What's happening, men are putting the power in women's hands, and what are they doing? They're oppressing us guys. That's happening back then, it's happening now. Second one, that womanhood is such a subtle essence of frivolity and contradiction that it needs some special code of laws to meet its exit. I'm not going to screw that word up. But the point is contradictions, right? When we're bad, we're not just bad people. There must be something else going on here, right? But when men are bad, they're just bad. The male element is destructive force, stern, selfish. This is more projection. This is female projection. They're projecting female traits onto men. Destructive force, stern, selfish, aggrandizing, especially that one. Loving war. Women love their war. Violence, conquest, acquisition, breeding in the material and moral world alike. Discord, dishonors, disease, and death. Everything she said is what her gender does. Of course, she has to project it onto us guys in order to oppress us, right? The need of this hour is a new evangel of womanhood to exalt purity, virtue, morality, true religion. When I tell you, all religions are woman worship, every one of them. To lift man up into a higher realms of thought and action. Thought and action. Like all the playwrights of great renown were men. The last quote especially, and many others from other members of the temperance movement, exemplifies what I'm talking about. The vulnerable, fragile, elevated, and superior mind of woman over the man, right? We knuckle draggers. We need to be controlled by these superior beings, right? Even though men did all the real creative work of the world, the creative mind is a male mind. The empathetic mind is a male mind. Reason two, early Western states like California were desperate to attract white middle-class women to settle the frontier. Very interesting, because you notice there's no incentive for them to do that. Like, you guys know how it actually works. There's a frontier. Single men have to go, suffer the loneliness, suffer the risk of the new frontier, build it themselves, and then attract women. But the women that come will be the desperate ones, right? They'll be the lower class women. They want the middle class women to join up, right? So they have to bribe them. Middle class women in the East, why would they go West? They already got everything in the East, right? The community belongs to them. The religion belongs to them. The men work for them. Why would they go West, right? Women's advocacy groups completely understood this leverage. They explicitly conditioned their migration and civilization of the West on the state providing strict legal protections from their domestic safety and emotional dignity. That is to say, dominance of men. That's what they mean. They always use their dominance impression. They always shield it with words like protections and dignity, right? Now, the impact. Burns versus Burns was directly used to setting off more precedents in divorce law that live on to this day. Here's Mencken versus Mencken. The names are always the same because these are divorced couples. These are couples, right? This is what it means to be a couple, guys. North Dakota Supreme Court. The wife sought a divorce based on harsh language and mental distress. The defense argued that because her physical health wasn't explicitly failing or impaired, it didn't cross the threshold of legal cruelty. They could see she was doing all right. She was just hated this guy, right? The court used Burns versus Burns to cement a radical new rule in North Dakota. Wow, North Dakota. It's not California this time, is it, guys? It's not one of these hippie states. It's North Dakota, right? Grievous mental suffering is sufficient ground for divorce as extreme cruelty, although it does not impair the health, right? This is right up there with what is it when women want to kill their children, right? Postpartum depression. Didn't want to bother with the baby. I just murdered it, and I don't have to go to jail because I had these hormones. This case officially exported the California framework to other states, legally decoupling mental anguish from physical injury. It established that a woman didn't even have to prove that her husband's disposition made her physically ill. The mere wounding of her mental feelings was enough to dissolve the contract and split the property. So this is 1900. So again, all these right-wingers that go on about facts over feelings, they're the ones, this is North Dakota, gave into those feelings because these men serve. Traditional conservative men serve. They're little bitch boys. All you right-wingers are little bitch boys. Fleming versus Fleming, 1892. Of course, again, this predates the 1900s. Decided only months after Burns, this case involved a wife suing for divorce because her husband had made a pass at the domestic servant, causing the wife deep embarrassment and distress. Now, you guys know in the modern era, there are all kinds of high-level male politicians that sleep around. The wife knows she doesn't care because she doesn't care about his sex. She's still along for the ride. She's there for his status. She doesn't want to divorce him yet. She says, I know I'm happy being the wife of the governor or the wife of the judge or the wife of the president, right? How many first ladies divorce? They don't because they know that their husband's going to be 8 years maximum. Right? So like I say, I should say the first ladies do divorce, but not during the presidency, do they? Right. So what it is, they're saying, oh, this thing that doesn't really bother me bothers me. This is how I'm escaping, right? Remember earlier that the husband even accusing her of sleeping around was grounds for her to divorce. Now her finding him sleeping around is ground for divorce. The court immediately reached back to its brand new Burns ruling to confirm that any unjustified conduct that grievously wounds the mental feelings or utterly destroys the peace of mind constitutes as extreme cruelty. Right? Oh, here we are, 1917, right? Maloof versus Maloof and Parney versus Parney, 1942, right? Again, all this predates the Second World War. Well, this one was during the war, I guess. Over the next several decades, men frequently attempted to fight back against subjective cruelty divorces by pointing out that their behavior was just standard marital friction, which it was, right? Or harsh arguments, right? Being stingy with money. In other words, again, the man, not only does he provide, in other words, he's the servant who makes the money. He's the one who has to deal with the debts. So the wife doesn't care what things cost. Just give me what I want now. And when things go tits up, who's she going to blame? She's going to blame the man, not herself. This is what leadership is, guys. This is what leadership actually is. In Maloof, the courts routinely shut down male defense attempts by citing Burns as the immutable baseline rule. Male judges do this all the time. Judges in general, but the male judges are even worse than the female. I find there's a lot of, you look on YouTube, there's a lot of female judges shutting down women, greedy women. No, it's the man-hating fellow man that can't wait to grovel at the altar of his goddess. The quislings that do this to their fellow man. Whether or not harsh treatment causes grievous mental suffering is purely a question of fact to be deduced from all the circumstances of each particular case. Okay, Lamar versus Lamar, California. A mid-century case was one of the final stepping stones right before Reagan's era. The court was evaluating whether a pattern of cold, indifferent, or critical behavior entirely devoid of threats or violence met the standard of extreme cruelty. Cold or indifferent? Wow. All right. See, the goalpost just keeps moving. While it does not mention allegations of adultery as well, there's no investigation into the credibility of the allegation. Just like now, right? Just like the Me Too allegations, right? And there was not even any mention of that allegation into the findings of the judgment of the case. The results were purely deliberated on the contents of the husband allegedly being cruel. The woman said so, it is law. And therefore granted the entire marital estate to the wife, the entire estate, so everything the man worked for. And you know what pisses me off? These kind of guys who are wealthy enough will do it all over again. They'll build up resources all over again, get married, saying this one will be different. She got everything except $2,500 to the husband. Wow, what? Men are losers. If you're a husband now, you're a loser. The reasoning behind this determining cruelty was purely hinged on the sensibility of the person alleging the cruelty. Well, on the woman, right? Oh my God. Whether in any given case there has been inflicted grievous mental suffering, I don't know if I'll read the rest of this. It does go for a very long time. Oh my gosh, it's still going. Okay. Fun facts about Butler couple. There are a lot of noteworthy features to the Butler case. Okay, I'm glad I'm kept reading. For one, Pierce Meese Butler was a very wealthy plantation owner. Plantation owner. Oh, wow. We say, slavery, it's all a man's thing, right? Women are just along for the ride, right? Who owned about 700 slaves, and he was the grandson of one of the founding fathers, Pierce Butler. His status and wealth were what had attracted Fanny to actress to him. To actress to him? Okay. See, hey, all you lookism guys, women are attracted to wealth and power. Who knows what this guy, what he looked like? Didn't matter. He owned a plantation. Nothing attracts women more than a man who owns slaves. A man who enslaves other men, right? So Fanny claimed extreme cruelty, while Butler was claiming that she had simply abandoned him. He was hunting for alimony. There you go. He was saying the truth, right? Fanny would later go on to talk about the cruelty of slavery. Right. She got together with a slaver. She knew he was. She enjoyed that lifestyle on the backs of slaved men. And now she's going to try and say, oh, he was a bad man. right? But only after she confirmed that she would win custody and alimony. Butler was made to pay $1,500 a year to her. Doesn't sound like much, but how long ago? 1849. So what's $1,500 in today's money? Right. And this was done after she managed to solidify a plea deal with Butler that if she gets paid that amount, she would not further allege any more abuse from him. That was the so-called deal, right? It's not a deal. This is extortion, of course. So this woman, of course, like so many women, live off the backs of sin, of the pain of others, right? This woman knowingly married a plantation owner. She is 100% guilty of everything he was doing. She enjoyed everything, all the prestige from it, all the wealth from it, the easy life. She didn't give a shit about those slaves. Now she's going to pretend she's the good person, right? Fanny also had a diary where she kept notes in the Georgia plantations, but she only released in 1863. See, this is way back 1838, 1839, right? What do I say? Men do this all the time. They see men as their opponents, so they don't admit any kind of weakness at all. They share all their vulnerabilities to their wife, who hates them more than any man ever will. And then she turns around and uses it to extort him. You have to be a fool to show your vulnerability to women. She released it in England explicitly to weaponize public opinion against the Confederacy and stop Britain from intervening on behalf of the South. Wow, what a complete turncoat. She married this rich man. She lived off the backs of enslaved men. Then she's going to turn around and pretend she's like a good little person, right? And in Britain, don't support the lifestyle that I enjoyed now that I'm no longer enjoying it. Who cares about anyone else, right? Fanny Keeble's alignment with the Union and British abolitionists allowed her to ride the wave of righteous political necessity. Her personal grievances against her husband were successfully retrofitted into a broader, noble crusade for human rights. Most women are posers when it comes to being for human rights. They're posers. Granting her an elite level of political legitimacy that a divorced actress in the era could never have achieved on her own. We know back then that actors were looked down on. They weren't paid multi-million dollars like they were, in the 1940s. Even in the 1940s, people looked down on actors, but at that time, that's when they started really becoming, with the big screen, made people wealthy and prestigious. Status came with acting after that, right? Her partnership with the abolitionist movement against slavery was arguably similar to how the temperance movement had won. I think he meant had done, maybe. This is another classic weaponization of the nurturing, vulnerable female mind. This is how nurturing women are, right? They become slavers. They marry slavers. They basically are slavers themselves. Then they ditch their husbands, absorb all the assets they can, and then pretend that they were never involved. That's nurturing, guys. Concluding remarks. The invention of the nurturing, vulnerable female mind, privy to, I'm not even going to bother trying to say that word, was the underpinning to how women fought for control over men. Perfect. Perfect. That's what this is. They fight for the control over us. A legal system that evaluates injury and wrongdoing based on the perceived social refinement of the victim. And we will hopefully see this again when we address the temperance movement. that occurred in a similar time frame to these cases. Right. Who was spearheading the temperance movement? Women were. That's why it was temporarily successful. Because women were putting their foot down and said, we don't want men having a good time getting drunk. That's for us. And by the way, that's why it was temporary. Because you know what? Too many women wanted to get drunk. So that's why it didn't last. But if alcohol imbibing was strictly male, temperance movement would never have died. We'd have it today. The legal action born in Butler, codified in the California Code in 1872, and the weaponized Burns in 1892, had a medical stamp of approval. Maybe you should have said legal. Women were clinically and legally defined as inherently fragile. Oh, I see why he says medical. Uniquely pure, right? Nothing pure like becoming a slave wife, right? Or a slaver, right? And entirely vulnerable to the unrefined dispositions of men. Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for this. Yes, upvote. Another banger post. He's the best poster on Reddit, as far as I'm concerned, right? Is it modern day feminists are inventing and pushing for Martin? Ironically, you can count on them using similar tactics to the above. Yeah, these guys are. They are modern feminists, but at the same time, they're just the most recent feminists. That's what I'd say. Because modern suggests that in the past things were different. This post proves otherwise, right? The temperance movement was about power and control of the lives of the working class men. Exactly. Women are anti-working class. I want you to know that, guys. Women are anti-working class. They hate working class men. They want to be the upper crust. They're status climbers. Women were never oppressed. Yes. Post is bang dang right. I am using AI to condense this into a paragraph to drop my comment. Yes, thank you. The TradCon cope that marriage used to be amazing, wasn't always anti-male, must be utterly steamrolled. Yes, agree 100%. Okay, guys, I'm going to put this in the description box. I'm going to be sharing it. I want you to share it. Guys, please share this. Apparently, YouTube boosts anyone that says this, and it should be said anyway. Everybody, every guy who cares about their own mental well-being, their own oppression, share this post. Thank you.